When David Goldman landed in Rio last month, it seemed everyone had an opinion about his fight to take his son out of Brazil.
Leave your son here because we have him here.
The tension was at an all-time high. But this time, David felt he got more open encouragement from Brazilians than ever before.
Loving bond of a parent and a child. The people get it.
Interest was at such a peak, David's face seemed to be flashing on every TV screen and in every newspaper. It looked like the end was in sight. But just hours after David got to his hotel, everything suddenly took a screeching turn backwards. To David, it felt like a cruel déjà vu. The very same Supreme Court justice who had held up Sean's return in June slammed the brakes on everything again.
This day is ridiculous.
We felt like we were watching, Jaws 2, because the same thing had happened in June. We were all afraid we were watching this movie again with the same terrible ending.
This time, the family was insisting that 9-year-old Sean be put on the stand to tell the court what he wanted.
Let the boy decide. He clearly wants to stay in Brazil.
At a press conference, family lawyer Sergio Tostes posed with a poster. He said the dejected boy had drawn himself.
I want to stay in Brazil forever.
And in spite of those psychologist reports about parental alienation, he denounced the notion that Sean was being psychologically harmed.
Whatever that has been said that has been tortured is totally false.
But Congressman Smith, who'd flown back to Brazil yet again, quickly hit back.
Some people say, why haven't we heard from Sean? We have.
He was heard loud and clear by these Brazilian court-appointed experts. You separate a child from a parent for this period of time. You poison the child's mind.
The war of words set the stage for what would become an extremely tense week in Rio.
So I'm on my knees begging for my son to come home.
We are ready to negotiate.
Negotiate what? There's only one negotiation. Bring Sean home.
Senator from New Jersey.
The international political pressure was ramped up to an all-time high. Angry about the endless court delays, New Jersey Senator Frank Lautenberg blocked the renewal of a major trade bill worth some $3 billion to Brazil's economy.
It was an extremely high-stakes poker move that he made.
Oddly, as David's attorneys pushed for an emergency review of the Supreme Court setback, João Paulo Lindsay Silva, Bruno's Brazilian husband, was nowhere to be found. Ever since Bruno's death, he'd been at the forefront of the fight to keep Sean in Brazil, saying he was as much a father to Sean as David. But now it was Sean's grandmother, Silvana, who was leading the fight. And with Christmas just around the corner, Silvana seemed to make an abrupt about-face, inviting David to spend Christmas night at her house with Sean.
We are raising the white flag. We are opening our hearts, saying that we want to have the family reunited.
They haven't said anything to me personally, and they haven't said anything to my attorney. I'm inclined to not believe the sincerity.
To David, it hardly seemed like a peace offering. At the very same press conference, the family's lawyer continued to attack David.
If necessary, I'll prove that he's not a good father. He's not qualified to raise Sean.
And Christmas itself became a source of stress. As the country began winding down for the holidays, David's legal team worried that the Brazilian courts would go on break before a decision was handed down. But late on Sunday, just 5 days before Christmas, the Chief Justice announced that he would make a ruling the next day.
We should mention this decision could come down at any time.
All day Monday, David, his attorneys, embassy officials, and Chris Smith stayed holed up in his small hotel room, practicing a painful game of hurry up and wait. Everyone was on edge, but the hours dragged on. Monday turned into Tuesday, but still no decision.
After a delay on Monday, Brazil's Supreme Court rules today on
We thought that on Tuesday morning, when we arrived in court, the decision would be already taken, issued, and ready to be delivered to the attorneys, and it was not. So, another surprise.
It had now become a game of international suspense.
Jersey dad David Goldman waits for a Brazilian judge to decide.
The whole world anxiously watching to find out if David Goldman's son would stay in Brazil or go back to New Jersey. On this second day of waiting, NBC News was granted exclusive access behind closed doors with David's two young attorneys. Ricardo Zamariola was only 23 when David first hired him. His law partner, Marcus Ortiz, is just a few years older. And with everything at stake, the nervous energy from these two young legal eagles filled the room.
It's almost 1 p.m. and we're still here.
Minutes stretched into hours. Each ring of the phone sent them jumping, testing their youthful enthusiasm.
If Sean does not return, this will give Brazilian authorities confidence to do whatever the hell they want.
By 5 p.m., after 7 hours of waiting, Ricardo made a sobering prediction.
Actually, yesterday morning I was confident about the Supreme Court's decision, but I'm not anymore. It's taking too long.
If they lost, it would be their most public legal setback yet. And worse, the future of a young boy who had already suffered through so much trauma was hanging in the balance. Finally, at 9 p.m., after 11 arduous hours, they got the word.
Casa liminar! Casa liminar determina a entrega do menor ao pai.
David Goldman had won. It was a solid 30-page ruling. Sean must go back to New Jersey immediately.
Is David there? Where is he?
In the frenzy, it took the attorneys a few minutes to find David.
David, did you get the news?
But stung once too many times, David was tempered. He only had one question.
When will we be leaving? When will Sean and I come home?
The next morning, David's attorneys were summoned to court to meet with Sean's Brazilian family. They wanted to negotiate the terms of Sean's handover. All day, lawyers on both sides engaged in heated back-and-forth conversations.
You were being pressured to negotiate with the family?
Yeah, even though we had a Supreme Court judicial order. Actually, I wasn't as much being pressured as asked.
Ultimately, the negotiations fell apart. There was only one agreement. Sean would be delivered to David at the U.S. Embassy at 9 a.m. the next morning. But as the media camped outside the family's compound that night, questions swirled. Was Sean even there? Would the family ever really turn him over? Coming up, you've seen the frenzied scene outside the embassy, but what went on inside?
When he saw you and you saw him.
When Bringing Sean Home continues.